I would like to very much thank our host, Laurent Guez, who is sitting here in front for taking charge of the organization of this workshop. So Laurent, many thanks to you and your team for doing a wonderful job. Yesterday, we also had the stakeholder forum here in these same premises, and this was also a very lively meeting. I also would like to thank the host institution, which is mentioned here. That's the Royal Belgian Institute for Natural Sciences. It's here in their premises that we have the pleasure of having this meeting. And if you have a little bit of time left today, so also take a couple of minutes to look at the splendid collection, which is really rather unique. So, having said that, we can start with the actual workshop. And first of all, I would like to invite Jana Kolar, who is the ESFRI chair, and Dominik Sobczak, who is the deputy head of unit at DG Research and Innovation, who will kick off the kick-off workshop with setting the scene. So thank you very much, and I hope you will all have a very lively workshop.
Thank you, Christian. May I first compliment you for being one of the few people that pronounce our two names so well. A warm welcome to everyone. I've seen several of you already yesterday, and I hope you've had that you enjoyed today as much as I have. I think we've heard some wonderful discussions and I've had some really great inputs for our future work. Now, first of all, I would like to thank also the Belgian delegations, Christian and Laurent, and the museum that is hosting us here in this location. And then I'll switch directly to the topic of today, so monitoring of research infrastructures. So we discussed this before in a few workshops, and I will just briefly review why we're doing this, because this part is called setting the scene. Now, we are doing monitoring of landmarks based on the fact that the Council asked us to monitor our research infrastructures. So based on that, we have started, there was a working group starting in 2018, which produced a report on indicators, on monitoring. That was published in 2019, and the work was then extended to produce the methodology for the monitoring of landmarks. These two documents were published, and we also had workshops with you before so that we could include your inputs throughout this process, because it is very important, we consider it very important, that this is not really a top-down approach. It is done so in cooperation with you, so that the outputs would be as useful to us as they are to you. Now, we need to do this because we award you the landmark status, and of course that one is not awarded and then it's there forever, no matter how you perform. You have your own monitoring within your institution and your funders. We do the part because of the landmark status. So this is the background why we are focusing on this. So the purpose of today is to present the guidelines, and then we will have a discussion and a kick-off discussion in the strategic working groups, and we will keep you informed also during the rest of the developments of the further documentation that you will need for during the evaluations. I will now pass the floor to Dominik Sobczak, who is representing European Commission today. Unfortunately, Leah could not be here. And I would just like to thank also Dominik particularly, because since the beginning, he was instrumental for the delivery of these reports and the fact that they are so well prepared, in my opinion.
Thank you, Jana. Good morning, everyone. Well, Jana has a very rare talent, not only to pronounce my name correctly, but even to do it in the Polish accent. and I rarely hear that. Well, welcome to all of you. Good morning. It is a pleasure to welcome you in this workshop today. Also on behalf of Leah, who unfortunately could not be with us today. Now, what I would like to briefly tell you about is to share some thoughts about why this whole process is important for the Commission, and what do we expect from it, how do we see it, and why did we engage in that. So in order to do that, I need to step back a little bit and look a little bit into the past. From the beginning of the era, we were convinced in the Commission that it is essential for European researchers and industry to have the world-class RIs in the EU. So we've worked, I think, very hard over the 20 years with the member states, with the scientific community, with all of you to make that happen, and we have generally, I think, succeeded. Now, with the 41 landmarks on the roadmap, I think this is a natural consequence of these 20 years of work to now have a look of how all these infrastructures that we have set up, many of which are operational, are actually doing. And it is important to establish with the landmarks an operational permanent communication channel. And I would like to stress that last point, because indeed this is how we see this process. We see this process as a process of establishing a permanent communication channel with you, with the landmarks, in order to discuss with you the challenges you are facing, your achievements, future plans, your development over time, and also to have, thanks to this mechanism, potentially an early warning mechanism and an opportunity for you to flag problems that you are facing in an environment which will be, I think, a kind of a trusted one, where we will be among almost friends that have a common purpose. And then, of course, we can sometimes help with your challenges or with your problems or with the issues that you are facing. Now, the monitoring for us is also about gathering structured data, and the data on landmarks operations, on landmarks performance and outputs. Data that we very often don't have today in the EU, at least at European level, and at least not in an integrated format. So the fact that we don't have this data has primarily two types of consequences. First of all, we don't really have a sufficient understanding of the landscape as a whole. So we have difficulties describing it. That's the first consequence. The second consequence is it also makes sometimes difficult to communicate to the outside world about RIs, their importance, and what they are doing and what kind of impact they have. So at the same time, the monitoring process is not designed to be done in isolation. And I think that this is important to stress. So we developed it in such a way that we would want to use as much as possible, and we would like you to use as much as possible, all the information and material that you already have available in relation to the different processes that you are already facing, including, of course, your reporting obligations to your councils, to the member states, etc. Or in the case of ERICS, your annual reports that you also submit to the Commission. So we would really not want you to see this as an additional burden. Of course, there will be a little bit of extra work. I mean, that's unavoidable, but it should not be seen as a burden. We should see it as an added value in further strengthening the communication between the RIs, the member states, and the EU. And with this, we also, I think I would like to underline one more element, that we would need to find a good way to connect the monitoring exercise, the monitoring process, with the development of the ERIC Observatory, which will be starting very soon with the ERIC Forum, because these processes have a lot in common, and we should definitely avoid overlaps and duplications. At the same time, this monitoring will have a broader relevance, and because it will have a broader relevance, over time, I think it's important to connect it also to ERA monitoring and to the broader impact analysis for research infrastructures and for the research infrastructures ecosystem in Europe. And then a final word, a bit in the direction of what Jana was also saying. Working together with all of the colleagues in ESFRI took us more than 2 years to end up where we are today. Where we will present to you and discuss the final methodology. And along the way, we have tried to engage with you as much as possible at almost every step, to consult with you, to be able to hear what your concerns are, or what your interests are, how do you see that process, what your practices already are, for example, with regard to KPIs, what kind of KPIs you are using, so that what we can propose is as relevant for you as possible. So we are here to present the final methodology, discuss it with you, but this is not the end of the process, and this is not the end of the development of the whole exercise. So we will engage, as you will hear later on very soon from Peter and Jeannette, will engage further with you in this process to make the most out of it for all of us, and we count on your continuous support and engagement in that. Thank you. Jana, back to you.
Thank you, Dominik. Very well put. So let's go to the now to the presentation of the monitoring approach. I'm inviting the chair of the monitoring working group, who's been the chair of the group since the beginning in 2018. Our German delegate, Peter Wenzel-Constabel, kindly join me here at the floor to present the monitoring approach, and then this will be followed by Jeannette.
Thank you, Jana. Thank you, Jana, and welcome everybody. Since we were talking about last names, you pronounced my last name very perfectly German with the English accent that most Germans apply. Thank you. Oh yeah, okay. Jana already mentioned, I'm more or less supposed to be in charge or responsible for the monitoring in ESFRI since over the last 4 years. And we have gone indeed a long way. Next, please. This is what you heard several times over the past years, in one or the other way. The whole developing of the monitoring, what's new is the public guide for the landmark monitoring is out since a few days. It's published on the ESFRI website. You should have been made aware of that. And you could have download all the relevant documents through the ESFRI website under a special folder or rider monitoring. So we have more or less outlined the whole monitoring system, and we want to start with the monitoring best as of today. Okay, it will not be very quick. So this is meant indeed as a kick-off workshop, as a start, as a break in the development where we had discussions over 4 years back and forth with reports and everything. And we now want to go into the practice. I will dwell a little about why we are doing that, not so much about the details what we are doing. This is something that Jeannette will explain later, and we will both be available for questions and answers and discussion after the 2 presentations. Now, the next slide, please. Again, the objectives. These were some things that were already discussed on different locations, but I think you should be aware about them. We want this regular landmark monitoring as a kind of a permanent or regular communication form, a method between ESFRI and the landmarks and ESFRI. So we will go through in these individual discussions. Both sides, I think, will hopefully go beyond the exchanges in the framework of regular stakeholder meetings, etc. We could discuss in more detail, or you could address in more detail also the problems that you have and the questions that need to be solved. That's one effect we hope that will come. I'm quite aware that this exchange is of course overshadowed by it's a monitoring process. But I hope that the monitoring process could be led in an atmosphere that allows the free exchange of information and freely addressing problems on both sides. The second point is, of course, the assessment of the individual quality of a landmark, the individual performance. Again, something where Now my memory is now quite long with the ESFRI monitoring, which I think we have mentioned in the first meetings in 2018 or early 19. There will be no benchmarking. We do not want to have a ranking of landmarks according to whatever we measure as their performance. This is not the intention. The intention is an assessment of the individual quality of the landmark against its own objectives, its own missions, individually. It is meant basically to help ensuring the quality of the individual landmark and thus to ensure the quality and the reputation of the ESFRI Landmark label. So we are not here in a kind of a competitive race. We are in a kind of quality assessment individually, based on individual assessments. The next, please. Now, in a little more detail, or not more detail, I won't go into too deep into the details today. The monitoring could, at its best, correctly identify some problems, questions, shortfalls, and thus is intended to give the landmarks a chance to either say the monitoring panel, the monitoring committee, ESFRI, is talking nonsense, that's wrong, prove it, or to, what's more likely, to take the appropriate actions how to deal with these identified problems. What's not intended, and I think these slides will be made available to you after the workshop. It's not intended to remove the landmarks from the roadmap at least in this first round, which extends until 2024. And it's not intended to remove landmarks from the roadmap also in future, unless they had a chance and they had the time to react by implementing appropriate actions. So the idea is basically, if we have a monitoring every 5 years, and we find some shortfalls in 1 year, we tell you, and then in the next monitoring will be addressed, did you do something about it? Or have you been wrong? Did not prove to be a problem? But that's a basic idea. So at least in this round, nobody is at risk. In the next round, only those would be in risk where there were severe problems and they did not address them and it got worse. And well, we shall see. I'm quite aware that there are now problems coming up to all of you, which were completely new and unforeseeable. But I think this will not be a topic of this monitoring now. Now, the next thing what we intend to do with the landmark monitoring is we will compile information not only about your performance, so it's not just clicking through some KPIs or collecting some reports and figures and so on. We also want to have a look at the output and the impact of the landmarks. But be aware, this monitoring is a performance monitoring. It's not designed to measure output or impact. It's not an impact assessment. Some of the questions we will ask would more or less ask you how you deal with impact or how impact could be shown, but we have no complete impact assessment, but we are aware that output and input are factors for the public and for politics in their funding decisions and in their political support of infrastructure, of research in general. And within the limits of the system we have now set up, we can help to support the political argumentation in favor of research, in favor of mission-driven research, in favor of curiosity-driven research, and in favor of RI funding. Now, when I talk about the argumentation, next please. We are now going practically to a kind of what I call oh, I thought my voice was so loud, so I was felt perfectly free to roam around. But okay, it's a technology. We're coming to a point, or we have come to a point, which I would call the meta level, which is going beyond the assessment of the individual landmark. The monitoring results would allow some, or that's our expectation, we expect or hope that it would allow some insights of the functioning of the research infrastructure ecosystem, the landscape as a whole. So what will be one of the steps we need to discuss, and where we have to look for the cooperation, especially of the research infrastructures, is to format the findings of the individual monitorings in a way that they could be used to describe the landscape, the ecosystem. How does the cooperation between research infrastructure and the stakeholders or the users work? Are there indications for certain common problems in general or in specific areas of science, for specifically structured infrastructures, whatever? Are there common problems? And we could thus, in one way, contribute to identifying these problems and see how they could be amended, not by ESFRI. ESFRI does not have the powers for that, but probably by the RIs themselves, associations of RIs, or by the funders. And again, this information would also provide a valuable input to the ESFRI landscape analysis. At least we hope that. The concept of the landscape analysis is going to be drafted or is in development currently in parallel to this process. Okay, the next slide, please. This is in a nutshell again what the messages I wanted to convey, the basic messages on why we are doing that. We do not intend to remove the landmarks in this round, to be monitored in this round, and we do not intend to remove landmarks without a prior warning. So in a second round of monitoring, there might be the risk, but not yet. Then the monitoring should help the landmarks to improve themselves. It's a feedback by ESFRI, an external feedback to you. And it should be helping to improve a sustainable and efficient RI landscape in Europe. That's what I refer to with this meta level things that I mentioned. Now, the next slide. Okay, the landmarks that obtained their status before 2018, the 16 is wrong. will be monitored. So we wanted to give you a couple of years to establish yourself after the landmark status, to have some times of operations before we come with this exercise. We do have a schedule for the monitoring of the projects. The details of this schedule should be discussed with the responsible panels. So there might be some shifts, but that's to be discussed on an individual basis. So 3 batches for starting 2020, 2022, 23, and 24, and we hope to be finished by the end of 24 with this first round of monitoring. We have built in kind of a self-assessment during these batches. We will, after each round of monitoring, I'm moving away from the microphone. After each round of the monitoring, we will have kind of a self-assessment. Are there any urgent procedural changes that we need to introduce before we go into the next batch? And after this first round, which ends in 2024, we will review the whole process. Did it work well? Were there shortfalls? And this is a point where we certainly would also invite the landmarks for their criticism, their remarks, and see how we could streamline this process then for the next round, which would then supposedly start after the next ESFRI roadmap, which is scheduled to be published in 2025. Now, the next slide I will more or less just skip, because Jeannette will soon inform you in some more detail, and there it is. She will describe the process, the detailed process now. After that, there will be ample time for questions and answers after the 2 presentations, also for the audience online. And what we intended is to have a first chance for a meeting between the landmarks, or the representatives of the landmarks present here, with the strategic working groups in separate groups at the end of the workshop after a coffee break. This will end the workshop, so we don't have a final wrap-up session or something like that. Once you have finished your talks with the strategic working groups and got the information you have, you are free to look out for lunch. But so far, please stay and wait for Jeannette Ridder-Numan, the chair of the implementation group. Oh, sorry.
So thank you, Peter, and also Jana. So I will tell you something more practical after the broader, let's say, overview that Peter gave about monitoring. And I think it's good to know for you a little bit more what is the practical side of our monitoring approach. And in fact, this is all in the public guide that you already have, if all is well. So it is in a special monitoring page on the website, and you can have this downloaded. And in fact, I'm going more or less through this public guide, let's say. So who is involved in the monitoring process? So that is the last slide, the one with last slide that Peter showed us. It is the monitoring committee. In the monitoring committee, that is all the chairs of SWGs and IG, and some of the people of the EB and some delegates of ESFRI. And they are responsible overall for the monitoring process. So then the monitoring panels are the ones that you are mostly talking with, having sending in your questionnaires, etc., etc. So the monitoring panels, there is one for each landmark. The panels are chaired by the persons that are in the strategic working group of the domain that your landmark is in. And these panels are formed by 3 to 4 people from the strategic working groups, and one of those is from Digit. And then there are 1 to 2 people that are from the implementation group. There will also be external experts, but they will not be inside the panel as such. They will write their own report to us so that the panels can look at their findings and take them up in their report. So each panel, as said, has a chair, and the panels are more or less working independent from our strategic working groups and the IGs, but of course the people inside the panels are joining each other in the strategic working groups and IGs to communicate to each other how their process are going, so that all the process in the panels are not diverting too much. So next slide, please. So the steps in the process, of course, there are steps that are taken by both the monitoring panels and the landmarks. So the landmarks, you will know who is in the panel. Of course, you will see them at a certain time because you are communicating with them, but you will also know who is the expert, the external experts. So you will have a chance to be informed about them. It is not something that we think that you say we don't want this person, but if it is really something that you say, okay, this person is against us, of course you can flag this to us, but this is for information only. Then what we are doing as step 1 in the panels is talk with you about what KPIs you have at this moment. So it is about your own KPIs, because you are already existing most of the times longer than the nice monitoring report that has this list of KPIs. Of course, this list of KPIs, this is also that you can use, because this is proposed by ESFRI as KPIs that are there. But you have your own. So we will see where you come up with, and we will see if this is something that we think is reflecting what we want to know, and also something that is not too difficult for you to measure. And of course, there is the RACER criteria. This is also in the public guide. It is one of the the set of criteria, let's say, that is explained in the first monitoring report. So I always forget it. So I just read it out because it is an abbreviation. So it is the criteria should be relevant, accepted by everybody, credible, of course, credible, because otherwise you get not the normal information that you want to get out of your infrastructure, easy to monitor. So that is, in our view, very important. We don't want you to do difficult things for your KPIs. And then they should be robust. So this is about the KPIs. Then we agree with you about all the documents that you want to send in, or that we ask you to send in. Most of the times, these are just the documents that you already have for all your evaluations that you do for your normal evaluation cycle. So we don't want you to make extra documents. The only document that we really ask you to send in is the questionnaire. So the questionnaire with the questions that is our following our key minimal requirements, like you did also for the project evaluation, the landmark evaluation when you became a landmark and so on. So there will be a much shorter questionnaire, and that will be complemented with the documents that you already have. So that is what you have to prepare. And then we also agree on the timeline, because some of the infrastructures do have their own cycle. And if you are just finishing your cycle inside the time that we are doing our monitoring, perhaps it is good to know when your cycle has ended so that we do our monitoring just a little bit later. So we can do this. So then, as said, you will receive the questionnaire, you will submit this, you will submit also the document, and then this is in the MOS Plus system. So you are all familiar with the MOS Plus system. So it's the questionnaire, the documents, and of course the KPIs that you have as well. So I think this is last for this slide, so please the next one. And well, most of the things that are here is actions by the monitoring panel, so that is something that we will do. We will analyze, of course, all the documents, the questionnaire, the KPIs, and so on. And this is something that is our input for the hearing that will follow. The hearing is not a hearing in the sense of we are sitting there in front of you and saying it is yes or no good. This is more like a discussion, and we can flag some problems that we think we see from our analysis, and you can answer what it is. And this is just, let's say, the monitoring discussion, so that we have this information from both sides also. So if there are things that we can help, we are perhaps not able to do so, but we will try to do so. And on the other hand, we will ask questions because we think perhaps that some things are unclear, or, well, we think perhaps that some things need to be clarified or go, well, so all kinds of things that you can come up. So then the monitoring panel will prepare a monitoring report, a short report, and this report will then be sent to you for fact-finding. So if there is something wrong in this report, facts, then of course we change this. These monitoring reports will be the basis of the reports that are being sent by the monitoring committee, the ESFRI Forum, because of course we do this also to inform the ESFRI Forum. So we will prepare the final monitoring report and then send it to the landmarks also, and it will be in the end sent to the ESFRI Forum for decision. So decision sounds a little bit like, oh my goodness, what is going to happen now? No, it is the final report so that everybody knows in ESFRI what is the outcome. And as Peter said, this is the first round of our evaluations. So we will not do a decision at this time. This is not enough. They should change something, or they should be out of the landmark list. No, the only thing that can be there is the recommendations to you for the next round to improve. So the next slide, please. So some additional things to know. Well, of course, like all processes that we have as evaluations and monitoring, we have the conflict of interest. We should take care that nobody in the panel is also is also inside a project, but also not that a country has the seat of a landmark. So that is something that we take care of. And then, of course, also the confidentiality, because we have these discussions, but the only thing that other people will see is the monitoring report. So all the other documents remain confidential. So this is something that only the panel will see. After that, we will have the monitoring committee, the members. So we are, as monitoring committee, not taking part in the panels. So all the chairs are not in the panels. So the chairs of the panels are people inside the panels, because we are forming the monitoring committee and we are discussing about all the reports. So we don't want to interfere, let's say, with our own reports. And then, as I said already, the ESFRI MOS platform will be used, so you will get information about that. And of course, very important, use the ESFRI monitoring guide as a reference. This is on the monitoring web page. And in this monitoring guide, there are also, again, references to all the other reports that are also in the website. So next slide, please. So the timeline. So now we are September, so in September, October, we will establish the monitoring panels. We know already more or less the panels, so you will get the names later. Then we will agree, well, starting in October with you about all the KPIs and documents and things. Then in November, MOS Plus will be open. Then end of January, we expect from you that you have submitted all your documents in MOS Plus. So that is an action by you taken before the end of January, and to take care that you don't skip your Christmas holidays. So March 2023, the panels will analyze all the information, so the external experts have sent in the reports. We will see all the reports and we will have our own information from what you submitted in MOS Plus. And then in April, the whole month of April, hearings and site visits are foreseen. Site visits only if the panel thinks it is necessary. So it is not so that all panels are coming to see where you are and so on. But in some cases, it will be helpful to understand how the infrastructure is working. Then we have in May, half May, we will have the draft reports. A week later, we will have the factual check. Then by the end of May, until the end of June, more or less, we will have the final reports by the panels, and it will be sent to the monitoring committee. And in the ESFRI forum of half July, there will be approval by the ESFRI forum of all these reports. So the overall report with all the underlying reports. Then after the summer, we will look back at the whole process that we have done with these steps and we will ask ourselves, is this the best way, or did we see some flaws and things that we want to improve? So the next set, the next batch may be a little bit different, but we hope that this is already a very good procedure and that we don't need to change that. So the next slide. So I took out the first batch. In the monitoring guide, you have the overall view of all infrastructures that is going to be monitored until 2024. And these people are, if all is well, are in the room. So there are 2 in social science and innovation, 2 in environment. We have 4 landmarks in the health and food domain, 1 in energy, 1 in digit, and 2 in physical science and engineering. So these will be the groups where we will be, after the coffee break, we will be together with also people of the panels. The chairs are there of the strategic working groups. The IG members will distribute themselves over the panel so that they will be over the domain, so they will be also present in these groups. And for practical reasons, we have combined energy and digit for today. So because there's only one in each, and we will be in one room. So next slide, please. And that is the thank you slide. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter and Jeannette. Now we are starting with the question and answer session. I ask you to join us here in this, join me here in the seats. I also would like to greet everyone online. We have more than 50 participants online, and I think we will see you on the screen. So if someone wants to ask a question, please raise the hand. Thank you. So, questions, yes. Back there.
Good morning, Alan Weeks from Eli Eric. Thanks, great. I read all the documents, ready to go. Well, not on the list though, but you will interface with the management of the organizations or with the governance of the organizations. And I think it's an important distinction because you can imagine already we are doing, for example, in our case, we're in ERIC, so we're going to be doing ERIC type monitoring, similar, maybe identical. We're going to have our own indicators from the host countries and maybe getting audited or monitored by them. And it just seems to me, before you even answer, that it makes sense to be your interface with our governance, which of course then the management does the implementation, but it would be kind of strange to have the governance kind of sitting outside the whole interaction.
Well, I think the primary contact for us will be management of the RI. So the organization of the RI, the management of this organization. Of course, we are aware there is a process that the management has feedback loops to their funders, which normally sit in their councils, etc., etc. And I think we would be happy to answer all kinds of questions also to the funders, which should also be represented mostly in ESFRI. Sorry. I hope I don't have to repeat everything. No, a primary communication point will be the management of the organization, and they are the ones to organize the provision of the information, arrange the contacts from the RI side, etc. I think you have your feedback loops from the management to your funders, to your stakeholders, and of course you are free to, or you need to inform them. And if there are questions where you want to have direct contact between ESFRI and them, you might organize that, raise this, that's up to you, but our contact point are the management bodies or the management of the RIs.
No, you can't, because on Zoom they will not hear you.
So thanks for that. I did participate in the working groups. We've given feedback on that. Don't recall that this particular issue was in depth discussed, but that I understand it makes sense logistically to interact with the management to be able to get the information on implementation level. I do think it also makes sense that there is a formal kind of process because it's not really maybe just a feedback loop. It's actually maybe, and it could in the end influence how quickly the management is able to respond, because the indicators, for example, in our case, and I'm sure we're no different than any of the other facilities, what those indicators are we have to go through a layer of a scientific advisory committee, an administration financial committee, and then to a general assembly to be able to determine and finalize those. So that is, that's in the chain. That's a bottleneck in a sense. And it just seems to me that since that is the level that really represents the organization on that kind of indicator level, that the assemblies or the councils would be directly involved in the process. I acknowledge the fact that you are going to interact with us, the management, but it seems like from a formal perspective, the formal body, that would make sense to acknowledge that. Because it may simply put us in a position where we can't react to you. And then suddenly there's not a report on time, or you don't get the information you need. And it wouldn't be hard to do that, probably.
Perhaps one remark to that, of course, you as the management of the organization, you would have a better view on the internal processes and how, to what extent you need to involve your council, your funders, etc., and what these schedules are. So this is a point to be raised in talking about the specific monitoring of this specific RI with the panel, to arrange the schedule accordingly that these things could be met. And I'm sure if there are issues that need to be discussed between ESFRI and the council, go to your panels. The panels will see whether they could handle it themselves or whether they want to involve the SWG or the executive board or whomever to meet with the board bodies, case by case basis.
So back there. Michael Ress from InfoFrontier. I actually have, well, two questions. The first one is looking at the timelines. I mean, so the first batch will be concluded in about 1 year, but the overall process you want to end in the end of 2024 with all 3 batches. So if you space that out, let's say regularly, then in some ways I have to, so how will so you will review the whole monitoring process 1 year from now. Is that correct? So I mean, you're, if I see your timelines, then by end of next year, you want to have like review the first, or you want to look back at how the monitoring of the first batch went, if I remember that correctly from the. How will this inform then the monitoring of the second batch, which may have already been started?
Yes, so perhaps I can say something practical about this. So we will reflect in September, let's say. If our reflection is that our process is quite in order, we can just go on. If it is not, it will be not very far from where we are. So we are now in October. So if we start with the second batch again in October, then we are still in 23, you see. So then we can do the third batch in 24. So we think that we will be finalized by well, the start of the roadmap process, in fact, with the 3 batches.
So you envision that the second batch starts about 1 year from now then?
Well, that was the idea, yeah.
And the second question was referring to the site visits. And I guess I already asked this question also the last time we had the online workshop. How do you envision the site visits for the distributed research infrastructures, where the management may actually sit somewhere else than the actual action?
That is also why we said it is not obligatory. First, we were really hesitating about site visits because there are so many distributed facilities, and in most cases it does not make much sense, or you have to do different site visits for one facility infrastructure. So that is up to the panel to decide. I think it is something for some distributed facilities. It is very good to show what you have. But mostly, I think this will be for some single-sided facilities. And even then, it is not necessary, perhaps. It is up to the panels. Yeah, because we have to do quite a lot, and it is a short period, so it is also from the practical side perhaps not always possible to fit this in the schedule. So we are looking at it from the practical side, if you don't mind.
We have 3 questions here, then we take one online and go back.
So it's me first or
Yes,
first online?
yes, exactly.
So I'm Thijs Geurt, I'm with the SKA Observatory. So what is your message to the landmarks that are not in the first batch? Just sit back and relax, or do we need to?
If you want to, if it's good for you, sit back and relax. But normally you should be aware of what's going on. Talk to your colleagues, exchange, and prepare for when the time is up to you. We intend to monitor the large number of the landmarks in these 3 batches now, and the others are supposed to follow in the next complete round, which will then start after the next roadmap.
So if I may add, it is also, I think, for the second and third batch, you can prepare yourself already a little bit. So of course, do just the things that you are doing and do them well, but also think about your time that you are starting this. You have the table with the timeline.
Werner Kutsch from ICOS Eric. I have an almost philosophical question. What's evaluation without a decision? So what's an evaluation without a decision? I want to explain. I would like to have a decision, a nice paper, this research infrastructure stays on the list of the landmarks, because this is very important for our negotiations with the stakeholders on the future finances. You know, we have all not eternal finances, and we have to go through financial cycles. And this is a very important message in this process, that we will have something like you are remaining a landmark. A short additional question. We are also thinking about future developments, so it's not looking back only. We also would like to look forward and discuss with the panel what are potential developments, and I think that's really important in this process as well.
Okay, for the second question, I think we cannot speak for the panels, but I assume we all also would like to have a look at what the future would bring and what the future developments will be for this specific landmark, so address it with this. And the first question, I think it's a matter of this round, so until 2024, it's a matter of fairness. It's the first time we monitor landmarks. We had this pilot process which went not so well as we thought, and now we have a first round of this process, which would give you, let's say, the first response by ESFRI on what we think about your performance after becoming a landmark. And the idea of this monitoring is not simply to kick those out who are not performing, but to have the decision postponed until they have had a chance to react to the criticism, which means the first decisions on probably removing landmarks on removing landmarks from the list. I think that could come, would be 5 years after this process. So at the end of the 2020s, there might be one or the other landmark that is in real danger to drop out, I don't know. I have no idea what the outcome of this process will be, and I have no idea, of course, how you could implement or how quickly you could implement actions to address the criticism.
Well, I thought, you know, I'm always from the practical side, so you want also to have a practical answer on your philosophical question, I think. So, of course, there is a decision. So that is the ESFRI Forum decision on half July. I think I put up 15 July. I'm not sure if that is really the date of the ESFRI Forum, but then there will be the decision. So the decision is taken on the monitoring report of your infrastructure. So this report can have some recommendations inside. So this is something that you can show to your board of governors or assembly or whatever, because this will give them also an insight on how we look at your infrastructure. But the decision is taken half July. So then you have, let's say, your decision. We can put it up on Twitter or something. ESFRI decided to have these landmarks on the monitoring list. Yeah?
Norbert Meyer. I'm from the Digit Group and Energy Group. My question concerns the indicators and KPIs, yeah, so the parameters for monitoring. As we can see, there are many domains, yeah. So, and I guess at the final stage, we would like to compare somehow the landmarks, yeah, giving some evaluation, compare in terms of the activity of the project. My question is if we shall keep it as general as possible, yeah, because otherwise it's difficult then to compare, or on the other side, there are different domains. So it means the KPIs and indicators probably would go deeper to the project, yeah, showing really the activity of the project and some let's say specific parameters of the project, yeah. Yeah. So the question is, if should it be keep as general as possible, or can we go also into details and talk about the really specific area of the landmark?
Now, perhaps I'll take this first. As I said before, no benchmarking. It's forbidden to compare the landmarks. And the second thing is, of course, everybody wishes to compare the landmarks. What I would say concerning the KPIs, that they should be KPIs adapted to the missions and objectives of the landmark. So go deeper, whether you have KPIs or reports, narratives, go deeper into the specific area, into the landmark, and but see that, of course, the monitoring report, and this was the case in all the reports I've seen in ESFRI the last years, that the monitoring reports could be then read against each other on the level of monitoring committee, the forum, etc., so that they are readable for outsiders. But the KPIs do not need to be coordinated to such extent that the landmarks could be compared on the basis of KPIs or on the basis of standardized narratives or whatever you want to introduce.
So we'll take now in turn one from the online audience and one from this plenary room, just so that also microphone can travel in between. So first one here, I'm sorry because the letters are too small that I can't see, but it's Christina. And then we go back to Francisca.
So, thank you very much. So I have just maybe a practical question, and maybe this will address in the next session. But so you mentioned that you will select the external expert, and the landmark can express some concern related to the selected expert. But I understand that this will not change. There is no final say, or we cannot work with this expert or not. Is it what you mentioned? Do I understand correctly?
No, okay. I'll take this question exceptionally. The point is, of course, the external experts are selected by the monitoring panels with approval of the SWGs and the monitoring committee. And normally the principle is also that, of course, the entity to be monitored should not select the evaluators. But what we want to do is to give you the names of these evaluators, and if you say, oh, this was the person who did this and this bad thing in our area of research, or to our RI, or he or she is the divorced spouse of our Director General and had a bad divorce, a war of roses, then we, ESFRI, might consider that this is a serious flaw, and we might look for another expert. But the final decision rests with ESFRI, and this should be clear. So if you say we don't like the nose of this expert, we of course would say, okay, but you have to go through this.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, my name is Francisca de Jong, representing Claire and Eric from Social Science and Humanities. I have a very, first of all, thanks a lot for the clarity on all the things that can be clear at this moment. I find the presentation very helpful. I have a very practical question related to the table on page 8 and 9, I think, in the guide, where there's a column that says monitoring year. And for the first batch, that year is 2022. Does that mean that wherever there are numerical indicators, you want them to apply to that year, so that in 5 years' time, the figures will be compared to the figures for 2022 and then later on 2027? Or is there another meaning in this label monitoring year?
Well, I think you have your own evaluation cycle. So you have your KPIs filled in over the year at a certain moment. So some KPIs you can fill in already now for 2022, perhaps others not, or documents that are not yet ready. So, but beware, of course, you sent in the documents by the end of January, so perhaps
they will then pertain to 2022. That's the meaning of that.
Yeah, so keep it as simple as possible, let's say. Don't try to do more than you should do, but if you have the figures for 2022, take those. Yeah.
Thank you. Here.
Thank you. So we also have a question from Patricia asking, we should agree on KPIs with panels in October. When are we going to be contacted by the panel?
Okay, that's a question, of course, on looking on the calendar, looking on the holidays and whatever happens now between now and October. Effectively, the panels are set up. The SWGs and many of the panel members are already here, so those who are present here could get directly now into contact with the panels, but the panels will get into contact in the next few weeks. I don't want to set some deadline, but I think that probably next week the first emails go out. And then this first talk should also be about the timeline. This is an indication on what should be done to have an agreement on the KPIs by the end of October. I think in many cases this might be fairly easy because some of you have the ESFRI KPIs, others do not yet have working KPIs, so we can't ask for KPI results. But that's a thing that might be easy in some cases and might be very complex in other cases. I'm hoping, I'm optimistic that most panels will, in most cases, the agreement will come by the end of October, but I'm relieved to leave the responsibility to the monitoring panels.
Yes, thank you. So we have the question here from the panel. I think Rory has the microphone. I would just like to say that because of the lights, I do not see you. So I'm just showing where the microphone should go. And the letters here on the screen are too small, so I'll just take it in order. So yes, Rory.
Yeah, Rory Fitzgerald, European Social Survey. Eric, I have just a question. Obviously, with each of the RIs has a specified set of aims and mission. Would there be any role from the panels in actually critiquing those aims, saying that there are things that they think are missing, or would the evaluation strictly be against the stated aims? Thank you.
Okay. First, of course, the evaluation will be against the stated objective and aims. Landmarks are not new projects. Landmarks have done several cycles through several types of evaluation within ESFRI. So we start from the assumption that your objectives and missions are thoroughly tested, thought through, and let's say, if it happens that scientific development opens another new variety of the mission for you, I think that's not the task of the monitoring to address that. It might be that it's mentioned, but this would be a kind of discussion.
Thank you. So we have a question online. Christian.
Thank you. This is more a comment on a question that was asked before on the link between the monitoring and decisions. I'm Christian Renner from DFG, German funding organization, and many of the research infrastructures will face funding decisions in the next years. And national funding organizations tend to ask for proposals and either grant money, continue funding, or discontinue. So the monitoring can help you in prepare for this and can support you in position yourself for these processes. National funding or processes normally cannot adapt a year-long discussion process for improving your KPIs. So I think this can be very helpful for the research infrastructures when they have to face their funders.
Well, I think, of course, we have our timelines and funding agencies have their timelines. So, of course, I can understand that these timelines are important, of course, but well, you have the timeline that we have here. So the decision, let's say, and the monitoring reports come only in July. So if you need these type of reports for funding decisions,
it's differently. What I meant, I meant that you give a lot of time for the research infrastructures for decisions to be made later on. So you give time for research infrastructures to improve. when they get a feedback from you, and national decisions normally do not allow this. This is not asking about the linkage of the timelines, just suggesting that it's very helpful to enter this discussion process now. So I personally would recommend any research infrastructure to be part of the monitoring as early as possible, because it gives you a possibility to improve for the next funding cycle.
Yes, of course you can use the results to improve. You can also use already the ongoing discussions that we had earlier in that year, and not wait for the report. So you can improve all your let's say proposals. Let's say that you have to send in earlier than 15 July. You don't have to wait for that. You have been in the hearings, you have had the chance to the site visit, perhaps by filling in the questionnaire, you already think for yourself, maybe this should be a little bit stronger or something. So is this helping you? I must say, we are struggling a little bit with when the people on the screen are speaking, because it is echoing in our microphones. So that is why I didn't hear the questions that well. But is this answering, Christian, your question? Yeah.
It was just a comment. I was just commenting that this monitoring is very helpful for the research infrastructures. It was less of a question, more comment on the earlier question, why you should engage with monitoring when there is no direct decision by ESFRI. It's a decision of the funding organizations in the next years that might be important. It was just a comment, more like a question.
Gert Verreet, Environment Strategy Working Group. I have a few practical timeline-related questions on the mentioned questionnaire. First of all, when will this common questionnaire be available to the panels? How much time will the panels then have to customize it? Will this customization require the involvement of the external experts? When are the panels sending the questionnaire to the research infrastructure, and how much time does the research infrastructure have to answer the questionnaire? Thank you.
Is it still working? Yeah, I think so. I even don't know how to put it off. So, I start with one important thing. We don't personalize the questionnaires. So the panel has the option. So, well, okay, if the panel wants to do so, then. But we thought it was better to have a more general questionnaire. And the research, this should have been taken out of the guidelines. So, yeah. So then I apologize for that, because we thought it would be. Okay, so if there are panels that want to customize it, you do this together with the research infrastructures. We will make, in fact, a general questionnaire for most of the infrastructures. These will be more than enough. And of course, infrastructures, you can answer the questions in the questionnaire the way you like. So you can send in more information, less information, only add a document or say yes or no. And if the panel wants to add something else, then you do this together with the infrastructure and say, we would like to add a question A1B or 1C or something. And we are starting with finalizing the questionnaire next week. We wanted to get your information, your input and see how we can use this also for the questionnaire. So we will take also this into account.
The question, because you didn't have microphone, was that whether the dates could be also finalized once the questionnaire is finalized.
I think we should finalize the dates as soon as we have this questionnaire. So we will send then the questionnaires to all research infrastructures. This is also a moment that the panel can take up contact for the first, let's say, meeting about the KPIs and what kind of documents you foresee. So we will put this in the communication that will be sent around.
Thank you, Jeannette. We go to John from Clarin online.
Thank you, John Picard from Clarin. Just a quick question. We know that demonstrating RI economic relevance is getting, socioeconomic relevance is getting increasing attention. But I understand from what's been said so far that this is only touched upon in this exercise. I'm wondering whether this will be addressed somewhere, measured, assessed elsewhere later on. Thank you.
Now, let's say from the beginning of this whole monitoring, we were quite aware that there are two different playgrounds. One is performance monitoring, one is impact assessment. We do have some questions which are also part of, if you look at the KPI list, which is not mandatory for this type of monitoring that we start now. There are also some questions which are used as indicators in the impact assessment if you compare it to the OECD criteria or the RI paths report. What's happening now within ESFRI is we are quite aware that we don't have kind of an impact assessment. And we have set up a working group or a drafting group within ESFRI where we want to develop some basic guidelines for impact assessment, not duplicating the old ones, and give probably some recommendations. This working group has started working, and I think by the end of next year there will be a proposal in discussion. And we shall see what the proposal will be, but I don't think that it will be something like, let's say, the final solution on how impact assessment could be done for everybody, because there were others that already tried that and failed.
Hello, I am Dano Beitia from ESFRI. I have a very generic question for all of you. I understand that this monitoring process is going to check how good we progress in all the different domains. But what I am afraid, and I'm not sure because we talk about this many times, is during the panel conception is going to be thematic panel, and how different research infrastructure, which are going to be evaluated by the same panel, are going to be compared, or each array is individual live and nothing to do with each other?
Well, we treat all research infrastructures as equal, and there is no one more equal than the other. So they have their own research infrastructures, KPIs, evaluation panel. Landmarks are totally different from each other, so they have their own KPIs. We don't compare one landmark with the other. The only thing that we do is compare our own processes amongst each other to see if we are fair to all landmarks. Is that enough?
No, it's quite clear, but on the other hand, is
one of the monitoring processes to check how good are the relation between RIs, which is also, I think, an important topic, not only on the single topic, I mean, environmental energy, but across domain, no? Is it correct, or I am doing, or I'm saying something completely wrong?
So, but that is not about comparing. That is about your own relationship with other research infrastructures and with the whole field of science that you are in. So, of course, this is a very important thing, but this is not about comparing. So that is, we want to stress that we are not comparing between the research infrastructures, because this is too, it does not make sense, because they are so different. And the KPIs are also then, because of that, also very different. But of course, you are right. Of course, this is something, the whole landscape where you are in is very important, that you show that you are there. Yeah.
Thank you. Now we have a question from Georgi, our Hungarian ESFRI delegate, referring to the comment made on the governmental involvement in the monitoring process. She's asking whether, for the ease of communication, could the ESFRI governmental delegate of the given research infrastructure of the hosting country be involved in the respective monitoring panel? From the hosting country.
No. So what I said during the presentation, we have the conflict of interest rules. So the governmental representatives that are in, for instance, in IG, they may take place in a panel, of course, from the IG, but not if this is an infrastructure that is hosted by your country. So we want to avoid that.
Bonnie. Yeah, my name is Bonnie Wolf-Bünsch. I'm the incoming director of CESTA ERIC. I have a question on the clarification of the criteria. So my understanding is that the set of monitoring criteria has been already well set. And is there any, or in the likelihood there would be a consideration of introducing new criteria, this would be discussed then among the landmarks, or could that be a possibility after you evaluate the first evaluation round? I ask because there might be some new criteria or criteria which has not been covered or could be a good idea to include in the future.
You are talking about criteria, the minimal key requirements, let's say. So, of course, in September, we are going to look back, and perhaps if things like that come up, we can also insert these in the new process. If you are talking about KPIs, of course, what we like to do is not to introduce, because it is not so much time that we have, that we don't introduce for you many new KPIs. We want to discuss with you what you have already, because you exist already a long time. So you have your own KPIs, and we will just discuss with you how these KPIs are fitting also with the things that we want to know as ESFRI. And if there are missing many of them, we can ask you to take up one or two or something, but it is not that we want to ask you do this whole new list of KPIs. It is not, we are not wanting to make you doing more work. It is also a dialogue. It is a monitoring process, but if you want to take up more KPIs, of course, this is possible.
Thank you. Yes, so we don't have a question online, so can the microphone go back there? Thank you.
Thank you. Nicoletta from Anna Eric. I suppose that there was some reflection put into the fact that we are not, we are quite young, Eric, from this year, that we are not in the first batch to be evaluated. So the question is there any way, I know that you said the documents and everything is confidential, so we don't have access, obviously, to what is going on in other ERICs. But is there any way that we can, I mean, what is, or maybe there is a way precisely how we can monitor this process, especially for the ERICs that are recent in this landscape? Was I clear with the question, or?
Yes, I think the question that
Okay.
the question is of course quite clear. Of course, we are not going to share documents that are confidential, so that is one thing that is clear. I think the questionnaire itself, the general template, is something that we will put on this website so that you can see this. I think this is something that we can do. And otherwise, of course, you can also ask friendly research infrastructures to tell them what they see, of course. But from the official side of ESFRI, we are not going to share confidential information about hearings or how visits were going or something.
One remark on this, I think the clusters are a very good place to exchange this information among the research infrastructures.
Yes.
So I'm Paco Colomer, the chair of ERIC Forum. So I think with ERIC Forum we'll be monitoring your monitoring. And I think it's very important because, as Dominik said, well, this is the ESFRI perspective with a very definitive and clear goal. Jana, you said it is to check whether the landmarks are worth its status, right? But of course, there are many other monitoring things that are happening, and we really need to work together into that. So Dominik said we have a similar system at the ERIC Forum, and I think it's very important that when this process is being developed, we are talking and have a dialogue, so that indeed the monitoring that is happening at these other levels, at General Assembly levels, at let's say review of our infrastructure. Some of the infrastructures are not in ESFRI, okay, this is another point that is well known, and how the process can be useful for the goal and also compatible to the other things that need to happen as well. It's not that I'm worried or anything, but I think it's important that we have this dialogue.
Perhaps a short comment to that. Thank you, Francesca. I'm very happy if there's an exchange between the ERICs in the ERIC Forum or between other RIs. And I would be very happy to have to continue the exchange and maybe intensify it on various topics with the ERIC Forum in the future. So I think they're not adversaries in this part, but I'm looking forward to the cooperation.
Thank you. And as far as I know, Jive ERIC, when the time comes, will be involved in the monitoring anyhow. So it's not just ESFRIs. Are there some further questions? Because we don't have anything online. We still have 5 minutes before the coffee break. But if we have exhausted the questions for this panel, yeah, then we go for the, yes, back there. So we'll have the coffee break, and then after the coffee break, we'll have discussions in the strategic working group and the implementation group.
And that was exactly my question. So the second and third batch to be monitored research infrastructures would not necessarily be in the room then for, after the coffee break with the strategic working groups. Is that correct?
Well, of course, you are welcome, I think. Yeah, so why not? So please come. We are not with so many people. And you may ask those questions that also batch 1 wants to know. So please
Okay.
join them.
So I don't see I don't see any hands up. So if this is now the case, I'm actually very happy because this was so clear that there are no remaining questions for Peter and Jeannette. So with this, I'm very happy to conclude this discussion. I see you during the coffee break and then within the further discussions with the strategic working groups and the implementation group. I would like to thank everyone right now, up to now, because we will not have any concluding words at the end of the exchanges within the strategic working group and the implementation group. So I'll thank everyone that attended this work and contribute this panel and contributed to the discussion, either online or here in presence, so that we all have more clarity about the process.